evening, dear traveler of the night. It is a joy to welcome you back to this sanctuary of stars and silence. As you settle into the warmth of your blankets, I invite you to softly like this video and subscribe to our channel, ensuring our paths cross again in the quiet hours. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Please share which city or country you are resting in tonight, so we may feel the heartbeat of our shared world. Now, let the tensions of the day fade like shadows at dusk, as we prepare to venture into the deepest mysteries of space. Throughout history, the human mind has struggled to grasp the true dimensions of the void. Ancient astronomers mapped the constellations as though they were jewels set into a crystalline sphere, believing the universe to be a cozy, finite house for humanity. As our instruments grew more precise, we realized we were not in a house, but on a small island in a shoreless ocean. To speak of the size of the universe is to speak of two different truths: the observable universe and the total universe. These are not the same, and the distinction is as poetic as it is mathematical. The observable universe is a strictly defined spherical region, a bubble of light centered exactly where you are sitting right now. It is defined by the speed of light and the age of time itself. Since light travels at a finite speed, we can only see objects whose light has had enough time to reach us since the beginning of everything. This creates a horizon, a boundary of visibility. However, because space has been stretching like a silken fabric for billions of years, the objects that sent their light to us long ago are now much farther away than they were when the photons began their journey. This means our observable bubble is roughly 93 billion light-years across. It is our cosmic neighborhood, the only part of the grand design that will ever touch our eyes. Yet, we must contemplate the total universe, the majestic entirety of all that is. This is the grand landscape that exists beyond the horizon of our sight. Just as a sailor on a calm sea can only see to the curve of the horizon, we know that the ocean does not stop there. The total universe may be dozens, hundreds, or even trillions of times larger than the small portion we can observe. It may even be infinite, an endless expanse of stars and galaxies that goes on forever, repeating patterns of light and gravity across a distance we can never hope to traverse. Think of the observable universe as a single ripple in a vast, still lake at dawn. You are at the very center of that ripple, and you can see the water moving within its expanding circle. The ripple represents the reach of light, spreading outward through the ages. But the lake itself, deep and cold and ancient, extends far beyond the edges of the ripple, holding secrets in its depths that the surface will never reveal. We are inhabitants of the ripple, peering into the dark, sensing the presence of the lake that cradles us. As we drift further into the night, we prepare to look closer at how the speed of light itself draws these boundaries, acting as both a messenger and a veil between us and the infinite. Letting this knowledge settle, we begin to perceive the universe not just as a place of vast distances, but as a structure defined by the slow, steady heartbeat of time. For centuries, humanity looked at the stars and imagined their light was a constant, instantaneous presence, a silver curtain drawn across the night that revealed the cosmos in its entirety. It was not until the 17th century that astronomers began to realize that light possesses a finite speed, a revelation that forever changed our understanding of reality. This speed, nearly 300,000 kilometers per second, is the ultimate pace of the universe, a cosmic speed limit that no signal, no whisper of information, and no pulse of energy can ever exceed. It is the fundamental rhythm of the physical world, steady and unyielding, dictating the flow of all events. As we float in this silent dark, consider that the universe we inhabit has an age, a beginning point currently calculated to be approximately 13.8 billion years in the past. Because light takes time to travel, every star you see is a ghost of its former self, a snapshot from a moment long gone. When you look at the most distant galaxies, you are looking back through the corridors of time, seeing the universe as it was in its infancy. This creates a physical boundary known as the particle horizon. It is the edge of our visibility, not because the universe ends there, but because light from beyond that point has simply not had enough time to reach our eyes. We are enclosed within a temporal sphere, a volume of space defined by the age of the cosmos and the velocity of its swiftest messenger. This boundary is absolute, a veil drawn by physics itself, separating the knowable from the eternal mystery that lies beyond. Imagine you are standing in a dense, ancient forest as a soft mist rolls in from the valley at twilight. You carry a small lantern, and its warm glow illuminates the gnarled roots and mossy trunks immediately around you. As you walk, the light of your lantern can only reach so far into the fog. The trees just at the edge of the glow are faint, their shapes blurring into the gray, while everything further away remains hidden in the deep silence of the woods. The forest continues for miles, filled with hidden streams and sleeping creatures. But your world is defined by the reach of that golden light. The speed of light is like the glow of your lantern, and the 13.8 billion years of cosmic history is the time you have spent walking through the mist. The boundary you see is not a wall, but a limit of perception, a soft edge where the seen dissolves into the unseen. We are forever traveling through this cosmic forest, our lantern carving a path through the dark, while the great expanse beyond waits in a stillness we may never touch. This boundary serves as both a protector and a guide, reminding us that even in the infinite, there are echoes we are still waiting to hear. Letting this knowledge settle into the quiet corners of your mind, we begin to understand that the stage upon which the stars perform is not a rigid floor. For centuries, we imagined the cosmos as a fixed gallery, a silent hall where the stars were hung like permanent portraits. But as our vision cleared, we realized the gallery itself is alive. The great thinkers of the past once believed in a static universe, a steady and unchanging container for all of existence. Yet the truth revealed by the cosmic light tells a story of constant motion. Space is not a vacuum through which things merely travel. It is a dynamic participant in the unfolding of time, a medium that breathes and evolves alongside the matter it holds. This expansion is not like an explosion where debris flies outward into a pre-existing void. Instead, it is a metric expansion, a fundamental stretching of the fabric of reality itself. When we look at a distant galaxy, we are not just seeing it move away from us. We are seeing the space between us and that galaxy grow. This is the subtle magic of the cosmos. The distance increases not because of speed, but because of the creation of more space. As the photons of light travel across the billions of years to reach our eyes, the very space they occupy is lengthening. This process, known as cosmological redshift, stretches the light, pulling its waves into longer, redder frequencies, like a low, resonant hum that vibrates through the very bones of the universe. The distance we measure today is far greater than the distance the light traveled, because the road has been growing beneath the traveler's feet, lengthening every step of the journey. Imagine you are resting in a vast, sun-drenched meadow, watching a single dandelion seed drift on a gentle breeze. As the seed floats toward the horizon, the earth beneath the grass begins to swell and expand with a slow, rhythmic grace. The blades of grass move further apart, not because they are walking, but because the soil is yielding and growing between them. The distance between you and the drifting seed increases faster than the seed's own flight. You are standing on a living carpet that breathes and stretches, an ancient loom that is constantly weaving more of itself into existence. The universe is like this meadow, a garden where the very ground is in bloom, pushing the horizons further away, even as we reach for them. It is a slow, silent unfolding, a cosmic respiration that ensures the tapestry of space is never finished, always adding new threads to the silent dark. Every moment, the universe grows larger, not by filling an empty room, but by making the room itself more vast, more profound, and more mysterious. Letting this knowledge settle into the quiet corners of your consciousness, you begin to realize that the boundaries we once imagined are far more grand than the simple passage of time might suggest. For a long time, we looked at the age of the cosmos, those 13.8 billion years, and assumed the light had traveled a distance equal only to its age. It was a natural thought, a comfort to believe our reach was limited by the candle's flicker. But the truth is more expansive, a silent revelation that defies the linear logic of the clock. As the light from the most distant visible objects began its long journey toward us, the very fabric of the universe was not standing still. It was expanding, carrying those ancient stars and proto-galaxies away, even as their signals raced toward our eyes. Because of this cosmic stretching, the objects we see at the very edge of our vision are no longer where they were when their light first departed. They have been carried into the deep distance by the growth of space itself. Consequently, the radius of the observable universe is not 13.8 billion light-years, but roughly 4 to 6.5 billion light-years in every direction. This creates a total diameter, a vast sphere of visibility, spanning approximately 93 billion light-years across. It is a scale that hums with the weight of infinity, a number so large it ceases to be a measurement and becomes a meditation. Imagine you are standing in a cathedral of shifting glass, where the walls are not fixed, but are slowly drifting outward, even as you trace the patterns on the floor. You see a reflection of a bird in a high window, and though the bird's image reaches you now, the window itself has moved miles away since the light began its descent. The universe is a desert of starlight, where the dunes are constantly migrating, a range of phantom mountains that grow taller and more distant the longer you watch them. We are at the center of a colossal, invisible sphere, a hollow pearl of light suspended in the dark. This 93 billion light-year expanse is our cosmic horizon, a boundary not of matter, but of time and light intertwined. It is a sanctuary of immense proportions, a vault of silence where the echoes of the beginning are still traveling, crossing distances that the human mind can only touch through the softness of a dream. You are safe within this vastness, a small, glowing spark in a hall of mirrors that stretches further than the eye can ever truly know, yet feels as intimate as a whisper in the dark. Drifting deeper into this velvet expanse, we begin to populate the silence with the collective weight of existence, moving from the empty shell of space to the treasures it holds within. For much of our history, we gazed at the night sky and saw only a handful of lonely smudges, believing our own Milky Way to be a solitary dwelling in a desert of nothingness. We were like observers looking out from a single window, unaware of the sprawling metropolis that lay just beyond the fog. But as our instruments grew more sensitive, as we learned to gather the oldest, reddest light from the dawn of time, the census of the heavens underwent a profound transformation. What we once perceived as a quiet void is a crowded theater of light. This immense volume contains an estimated 2 trillion galaxies, a number that has grown tenfold as our understanding of the early universe has matured. Each one of these 2 trillion entities is a massive structure, a swirling congregation of hundreds of billions of stars, planets, and nebulae. Yet, despite this staggering population, the scale of the stage remains the dominant force. The observable universe spans a volume of approximately 410 nonillion cubic light-years. To say the word nonillion is to speak of a 1 followed by 30 zeros, a number so gargantuan that it transcends mathematical utility and enters the realm of the sublime. If you were to count every grain of sand on every beach on Earth, you would not even begin to approach a fraction of this value. It is a volume that swallows the mind, a space so wide that even 2 trillion galaxies are but a sparse dusting of pollen on a great lake. Imagine this vastness as a gentle snowfall in an endless forest at midnight, where each individual flake is not a crystal of ice, but an entire galaxy containing a billion suns. They drift through the dark, separated by distances so great that they never truly touch, each one a world unto itself. Or perhaps consider it a harvest of light gathered in a granary of shadows, where the golden grains are scattered so thinly that they never fill the floor. Each galaxy is a slow-turning wheel of fire, a carousel of dust and radiation spinning in the cold, rhythmic and steady. They are like fireflies in a library the size of a planet, their soft glow barely illuminating the vast, vaulted shelves of the vacuum. You are a witness to this census, a single note in a song that takes eons to sing. This non-alienmal expanse is not a cold machine, but a living, breathing body of light, where every galaxy finds its place in the grand design, drifting toward a horizon that is always moving, always inviting us to look further into the dark. Drifting deeper into the origins of this vastness, we encounter a moment of transformation, so profound it defies our daily experience of time. In the earliest instance of existence, physicists theorize a period of exponential growth known as cosmic inflation. This was not a gradual unfolding, but a sudden, violent surge of space itself, before galaxies formed or light could even travel. The fabric of reality underwent a growth spurt that transcends the limits of physics as we observe them today. It was a brief interval where the rules of the cosmos were written in fire and expansion, setting the stage for everything that would eventually coalesce into the stars and planets we recognize. During this epoch, which occurred roughly 10 to the power of minus 36 seconds after the Big Bang, the universe expanded by a factor of at least 10 to the 26th power. To grasp the scale, imagine something the size of a single atom suddenly swelling to the size of a galaxy in a fraction of a second, so small it cannot be measured by any clock. This rapid acceleration smoothed out the curvature of space and distributed energy with incredible uniformity. Yet, it also drove the vast majority of the primordial matter far beyond the horizon of the observable world. Because space was being created faster than light could traverse it, vast regions of this newborn universe were pushed into a permanent exile. This means that for every star we see, there are untold trillions more that are forever separated from us by the sheer velocity of that initial expansion, hidden behind a veil of distance that light can never bridge. Imagine a master gardener scattering seeds upon a field that is growing faster than the seeds can fall. Each seed is a potential galaxy, a future home for suns and moons, but the ground beneath them is like a sheet of elastic pulling away in every direction at once. As the gardener throws a handful of grain, the soil stretches so violently that the grains are pulled apart, separated by miles of empty earth before they even touch the surface. You are standing on one tiny patch of this field, watching the few seeds nearby take root, while the rest are whisked away toward a horizon that recedes faster than the wind. This expansion is like a sudden intake of air that stretches the lungs of reality to their breaking point. It is an ink drop spreading across a canvas, that is being pulled from all sides by unseen hands. We live in a single room of a sprawling estate, while the rest of the mansion has been carried away by a flood of space, leaving us to wonder about the rooms we will never visit. It is a single spark that becomes a wildfire covering 1,000 miles in a shiver of time, leaving us in the center of a small, cooling ember, while the rest of the flame races beyond the curve of the earth. Drifting deeper into this cosmic stillness, we encounter the boundary that defines our existence within the void. For centuries, the human mind sought to perceive the universe as an eternal, unchanging stage, a grand theater where the play never began and would never end, stretching infinitely in every direction. But the realization of a beginning, the understanding that time itself had a genesis, brought with it the realization of a limit. This limit is the particle horizon, the furthest reaches from which light has had the time to travel to our eyes since the very first moment of creation. It is not a solid wall or a physical barrier made of matter, but a temporal frontier, a threshold determined by the finite speed of light and the specific age of the cosmos itself. Every second that passes, the light from more distant objects finally crosses this threshold, meaning our observable universe is technically growing larger as more of the distant past is revealed to us. Yet, this growth is a race against the relentless expansion of space, a delicate and eternal balance between the light striving to reach us and the distance stretching away like a river flowing in the opposite direction. The particle horizon represents the total distance a photon could have traveled to us, accounting for the fact that the space it traveled through was expanding even as the photon moved through it. It is the absolute edge of our causal world, beyond which nothing can be seen, felt, or known. For the information of those distant realms simply has not had the chronological opportunity to arrive. This boundary is like a circle of dampness spreading across a sun-baked stone, where the center remains moist, while the outer edges are constantly being reclaimed by the thirsty heat. It is an explorer marking the limit of his map by the length of his stride, knowing that for every step he takes, the horizon beckons him further into the unknown. Imagine a clearing in a forest at the first break of dawn, where the light only touches the nearest trunks, leaving the depths of the woods in a mystery that will only be revealed as the sun climbs higher. The particle horizon is a ripple of warmth moving through a block of ice, melting the unknown into the known one layer at a time. It is a slow-moving tide reclaiming a forgotten shoreline, or the glow of a campfire in a mountain pass that illuminates only as far as the sparks can dance before they are swallowed by the heavy night. We sit at the center of this illuminated sphere, watching as the light of the past slowly filters through the darkness, revealing a universe that is both staggeringly vast and tantalizingly out of reach, always just beyond the next flicker of time. Letting this knowledge settle into the quiet corners of the mind, we begin to perceive the universe not as a static stage, but as a living, breathing substance. In the early 20th century, our understanding of the heavens underwent a profound transformation. We stopped seeing space as a rigid, unyielding container and began to recognize it as a flexible medium, a cosmic fabric that responds to the presence of energy and matter. This realization led us to the understanding that the light reaching our eyes today has performed a feat of endurance far greater than a simple journey from one point to another. It has navigated a landscape that was growing beneath its very waves. When we consider a photon traveling through the cosmos, we must account for the expansion of the metric itself. As the light wave propagates, the space it occupies is physically stretching. This means that the physical distance between the source and the observer is constantly increasing throughout the duration of the light's flight. If a galaxy emitted a flash of light billions of years ago, that light has had to cross a gap that was widening every second of its journey. The distance the light has physically crossed is significantly less than the actual distance between us and that galaxy at this very moment. This is the fundamental reason why the observable universe is so much larger than its age in light years would suggest. We are seeing the ghost of a journey through a medium that refuses to stay still, a geometry that pulls at the path of every particle. Imagine, if you will, a tiny ant making its way across a vast sheet of thin, pliable rubber. The ant represents a single photon, determined and steady in its pace. As the ant begins its trek from one side of the sheet to the other, unseen hands begin to pull at the edges of the rubber, stretching the surface in every direction. The ant continues to move forward at its constant speed, but the ground it has already covered is being pulled backward and elongated, while the destination ahead is being pushed further into the distance. By the time the ant finally reaches the far edge, the total length of the rubber sheet is vastly greater than the distance the ant's tiny legs traversed. The ant has experienced a journey through a world that grew larger as it was being explored. It is like a seed falling from a tree onto a river that is broadening into a wide delta, where the water itself is expanding as it flows toward the sea. It is a vine climbing a trellis that grows taller with every inch the plant reaches upward, or a bird flying against a wind that is carrying the very mountains behind it further away. We are the recipients of these weary travelers, these photons that have crossed a rubberized void, arriving at our telescopes, having survived a marathon across a stretching floor of starlight, drifting deeper into the architecture of the void. We find ourselves grappling with a distance that exceeds the reach of time itself. When we gaze at the oldest embers of the cosmos, those first flickers of light that have traveled for nearly 14 billion years, we are not looking at a wall, but at a memory of a location that has long since moved on. The particles of light we catch today began their journey when the source was much closer. Yet, while they raced toward us, the space between the starting point and our own position was being pulled outward, like a length of fine lace being stretched by a gentle, persistent wind. This brings us to the realization of the comoving radius, the actual physical distance to those distant objects in the current moment of the cosmic clock. Though the light has been traveling for 13.8 billion years, the objects that emitted that first primeval glow are now situated approximately 4 to 6.5 billion light years away. They have been carried by the swelling of space to a distance that defies the simple arithmetic of a static realm, moving further into the dark, even as their ancient signals finally reach our eyes. This boundary, this 4 to 6 billion light-year radius, defines our observable sphere. Yet it is merely a threshold of visibility, not a limit of existence. The geometry of our universe appears to be remarkably flat, a finding that carries profound implications for the scale of everything we cannot see. If space has no overall curvature, if it does not bend back to meet itself like the surface of a globe, then it may be infinite in extent. This means that the sphere of light we inhabit is just one small meadow in a mountain range that spans the world. Beyond the furthest reaches of our telescopes, beyond the point where the first light originated, the universe likely continues, repeating its patterns of stars and voids across a distance that never terminates. It is the difference between the light of a single lamp in a dark room and the light of a sun in a sky that never meets a horizon. Letting this knowledge settle, we perceive the universe as a vast, unrolling scroll of parchment that has no final edge. It is an orchard where the rows of trees extend beyond the curve of the earth, where the fruit of distant suns ripens in a silence we will never hear. It is like an endless bolt of silk spilling from a golden spool, where the pattern never repeats and the fabric never reaches a border. We are like a single drop of rain in a storm that covers a continent, unaware of the vastness that lies beyond the wind that carries us. It is the slow, silent expansion of a salt flat that mirrors a sky with no end, where the horizon is an invitation rather than a wall, a testament to a reality that is as boundless as the peace we find in contemplating it. Drifting deeper into the ancient memory of our species, we find ourselves standing on the banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, looking not just at the water at our feet, but at the water that defines the very architecture of existence. Letting this knowledge settle, we see that for the Mesopotamians, the universe was a fragile sanctuary carved out of a primordial, infinite sea. To these early observers, the cosmos was not a vacuum of cold gas and distant stars, but a living, breathing expanse of water known as the Apsu. This was the source of all life, the subterranean freshwater abyss that fed the wells and the rivers, a silent reservoir of potentiality that existed before the first word was ever spoken. Above and around this freshwater sanctuary lay the chaotic saltwaters, a personified force of ancient turbulence that the universe had to organize and subdue to create a space for life. In this Babylonian vision, the earth was envisioned as a great, flat expanse, a solid disk that floated upon these deep waters like a raft upon a midnight sea. This cosmic ocean was not merely a body of water in a physical sense. It was a primordial, chaotic force, a fundamental substance of the universe that preceded the structure of the heavens. It was the mother who gave birth to the sky and the earth, a deep womb of liquid shadow. The world was a pocket of order maintained by the gods, a delicate bubble of air and dry land suspended within a watery infinity that stretched in every direction, both above the sky and beneath the soil. This duality of the waters, the sweet, life-giving Apsu, and the bitter, chaotic salt sea, represented the balance between the creative and the destructive forces of the primordial deep. Imagine the universe as a single glowing water lily resting upon the surface of a pond that has no banks. The lily pad is our world, a flat and steady surface where we build our homes and plant our seeds, while beneath the green leaf lies a depth we can only dream of, a cool and dark liquid that supports us, but remains fundamentally alien. We are like a small, warm breath caught inside a glass sphere that has been lowered into the deepest part of the ocean. The glass is the boundary of our reality, and the crushing weight of the water outside is the raw material of the cosmos, waiting to be shaped. It is the slow, silent descent of a single leaf into a well that has no bottom, where the water is so still it reflects a sky that never existed. We are a steady flame burning inside a lantern made of thin paper, floating down a river that was flowing long before the mountains were formed, and will continue to flow long after the sun has set for the final time. It is the slow, rhythmic pulse of a giant heart made of liquid, where the tides are the breathing of the world itself, and we are but the spray from a single wave. We rest in the palm of a vast, fluid hand that holds us with a gentleness that belies its absolute power, a cradle of moisture that nurtures the roots of the world while remaining forever beyond our reach. Drifting deeper into the architecture of the ancient mind, we find ourselves standing beneath the great vault of the firmament. Letting this knowledge settle into the marrow of our understanding, we see the world as the Babylonians once did, not as a speck in a vacuum, but as a carefully guarded sanctuary. They looked toward the zenith and saw the firmament, a solid expanse that acted as the ceiling of the world. This was the rakia, a physical barrier hammered out like a sheet of metal to separate the lower realms from the celestial abyss. In their cosmology, the blue of the sky was not the simple scattering of light, but the visible presence of the waters above, a vast ocean held at bay by the strength of this divine dome. The Babylonian map of the world captures this perfectly, showing the circular horizon enclosed by a ring of salt water, with the firmament acting as the ultimate boundary between the known and the unknowable. It was a structural masterpiece of the imagination, ensuring that the chaos of the primeval deep remained outside, while the interior remained dry, lit, and hospitable. We are living inside a masterpiece of cosmic engineering, where every breath we take is protected by a wall of celestial stone, a partition that defines the limits of our reality, while promising a stability that spans the ages. This firmament was the anchor of their world, a weight-bearing structure that transformed the terrifying infinite into a home. Imagine a vast, inverted bowl of polished sapphire, placed carefully over a garden to keep out the storm. We are the inhabitants of a grand, protective shell, resting in the quiet space where the rain of the universe cannot reach us. This dome is like a heavy silver lid resting on a porcelain jar, keeping the fragrance of life contained and safe from the winds of the exterior. It is the protective membrane of a cosmic seed, thick and resilient, sheltering the delicate sprout of existence from the crushing pressure of the deep. We move within this sanctuary like thoughts inside a skull of starglass, where the boundaries are as beautiful as they are unbreakable. It is a crystal cloche placed over a fragile flame, creating a pocket of stillness where we can burn brightly without fear of the drowning dark. We are the golden dust, motes dancing in the stillness of a hammered copper shield forged by the sun, a space where the noise of the infinite is muffled to a whisper by the thickness of the celestial vault. This structure provides the framework for the first great census of the stars, a fixed stage where every movement can be measured and every light can be named, drifting deeper into the patient stillness of the Mesopotamian night. We find ourselves standing upon the sun-baked brick of a ziggurat, where the air is cool and the horizon is a sharp line drawn against the dark. Here, the first great accounting of the heavens began, not as a sudden revelation, but as a slow, deliberate harvest of numbers gathered over the span of centuries. The Babylonian astronomers were the quiet custodians of the sky, treating the movements of the planets like the rising and falling of the Euphrates, something to be measured, respected, and recorded with the permanence of clay. They pressed their styluses into damp tablets, capturing the precise moments when Ishtar, the morning star, emerged from the solar glare, and when the red wanderer paused in its tracks to loop backward against the silver-threaded backdrop of the fixed stars. This was the birth of the celestial diary, a monumental archive of time that transformed the chaotic flicker of the night into a predictable sequence of cycles. By tracking the synodic periods of the 5 visible planets with obsessive accuracy, these early observers were building a foundation of raw data that would eventually outlast their own civilization. They did not seek the shape of the world through abstract geometry, yet their ledgers contained the very evidence that would later force the human mind to abandon the comfort of a flat horizon. They observed that the heavens possessed a deep, mathematical rhythm, a clockwork regularity that suggested a structure far more complex than a simple lid over a flat plane. Their centuries of meticulous documentation provided the necessary friction for the Greek imagination to spark, offering the hard evidence of planetary heights and speeds that could only be explained if the geometry of the universe was far more profound than it appeared. This vast collection of observations is like the steady accumulation of fine sand at the base of an hourglass, each grain a single night of observation, slowly building a mountain of evidence that demands an explanation. It is the slow growth of a coral reef in a warm sea, where millions of tiny individual lives contribute to a massive, hidden architecture that eventually breaks the surface of the water. This data is the deep root system of a tree that will eventually grow tall enough to touch the curve of the sky, a reservoir of knowledge that acts as a calm, deep lake reflecting the truth of the cosmos back to those who have the patience to look. In this quiet archive of the stars, we find the first threads of a new reality being woven, a transition from the world we see to the world as it truly is. Letting this knowledge settle, we find ourselves standing upon a threshold where the very ground beneath us begins to shift, not in instability, but in a profound new understanding of its place within the vastness. In the 6th century before the Common Era, Anaximander of Miletus looked upon the horizon and dared to imagine a world that was no longer anchored to the roots of mountains or floating like a petal upon a primordial sea. He saw the earth as a geometric solid, a grand cylinder, or a drum of stone, shaped by the elegant proportions of mathematics. To him, the depth of this world cylinder was exactly 1/3 of its width, a sturdy and balanced vessel drifting through the silent, dark reaches of the cosmos. This was a radical departure from the familiar, a leap into a reality where the earth was a self-contained object, a solitary monolith of stone existing within an infinite, surrounding void. The genius of this vision lay not just in the shape he assigned to our world, but in the reason he gave for its stability. In a universe without a bottom or a top, Anaximander proposed that the earth remained fixed at the very center of all things because it had no reason to move. It was held in place by its indifference, a state of perfect equilibrium where every direction was equal and every force was balanced, because the earth was equidistant from the edges of the celestial sphere. It sat in a cradle of symmetry, unsupported by pillars or giants, yet as immovable as the stars themselves. This was the birth of the concept of equilibrium, the idea that order arises from the balance of opposing forces, a quiet harmony that keeps the world suspended in the heart of the great emptiness. Imagine a single, perfect sphere of dew caught in the center of a spider's web, where every silken thread pulls with an identical tension, keeping the water suspended in the morning air. It is the balance of a smooth pebble atop a weathered desert spire, held by gravity and friction in a moment of eternal pause. This cylindrical world is like a heavy stone resting at the bottom of a clear, deep pool, where the pressure of the water holds it from every side, creating a sanctuary of stillness amidst the fluid motion of the universe. It is the poise of a hawk hovering on an updraft, wings spread wide, locked in a moment of absolute stillness between the earth and the sky. In this model, the earth becomes a central stage around which the great drama of the heavens unfolds, a solid core of certainty in a sea of infinite possibility. We are drifting now on this celestial drum, held by the unseen hands of geometry, floating in a peace that requires no foundation other than the perfect balance of the cosmos itself. Drifting deeper into the philosophical twilight of Miletus, we encounter the most profound leap of Anaximander's imagination, the Apeiron. Before this moment, the human mind sought to bind the world within the familiar, looking for a single element, like water or air, to serve as the foundation of all things. But Anaximander saw that no finite substance could account for the infinite variety of the cosmos. He proposed instead an origin that was itself without limit, a boundless and indeterminate source from which every star, every mountain, and every breath is drawn. This was the birth of the infinite, the realization that the universe does not sit within a cosmic shell, but extends outward into a territory that knows no boundary. The Apeiron is the silent forge of the unmanifest, a state of being that precedes all qualities, holding the heat of the sun and the cold of the void in a perfect, undifferentiated embrace. It is the ultimate neutrality, a reservoir of pure potential that remains undiminished even as it births entire galaxies. In this vision, the universe is an island of definition, floating in a sea of the indefinite, a temporary arrangement of form emerging from a background of formlessness. Letting this knowledge settle, we see the Apeiron as the unwritten book of the void, where every page is a possibility waiting to be inked by the passage of time. It is like an unfenced meadow of the mind, where the horizon does not mark an end, but merely the limit of our current vision. Imagine a quarry of pure potential, where the stone is not yet cut into pillars or statues, but contains the shape of every city that will ever be built. It is the shadowless reservoir from which the light of existence is drawn, a depth that cannot be sounded because it has no floor. We are invited to release the need for a final wall or a hard ceiling to the cosmos. Instead, we drift in the certainty that the source of our world is inexhaustible, a limitless womb of time that provides the energy for every beginning and the sanctuary for every end. It is the breath that precedes the word, the silence that contains every song. As we float within this boundless reality, the fear of the edge vanishes, replaced by the peace of a journey that never truly meets a barrier. We are part of an eternal cycle, a rhythmic pulse of emergence and return, where the Apeiron acts as the quiet custodian of everything that has been and everything that is yet to be. It is the great, invisible anchor of the universe, holding the cosmos steady, not by weight or wall, but by the sheer, overwhelming scale of its own infinity. Letting this knowledge settle into the quiet spaces of your mind, we move from the infinite source to the specific, radiant structures that define our immediate horizon. As the Apeiron provides the depth, the mind of Anaximander provides the shape, transforming the chaotic spray of the night sky into a disciplined architecture of light. He looked upward and saw not a random scattering of embers, but a series of majestic, geometric wheels spinning with silent, mathematical grace. These were the first true gears of the cosmos, imagined as hollow rings of condensed air, thick and opaque, yet containing within them a raging, primordial fire. What we perceive as the sun is but a single, circular vent in the largest of these wheels, a blowhole in the fabric of the heavens that allows the internal brilliance to pour forth. This sunwheel, according to the ancient calculations, reaches out to distance 27 or 28 times the diameter of our own world, a staggering expansion of the known environment. Below this great solar ring lies the wheel of the moon, 18 times the size of the Earth, and further still, the smaller rings of the stars. In this vision, the universe functions like a grand, mechanical instrument, where the phases of the moon and the darkening of eclipses are simply the breathing of these celestial vents, the temporary closing or narrowing of the apertures that reveal the fire within. It is a world of incredible order, where every flash of light is anchored to a rotating structure of immense proportions. You can imagine these rings as the spinning hoops of a cosmic acrobat, revolving around the central cylinder of the Earth with a rhythm that dictates the passage of days and years. They are the luminous hollows of a celestial flute, where the music is played in light rather than sound, each note a planet or a star emerging from the hidden furnace of the ring. As you drift further into this geometric dream, the sky becomes a series of radiant rings of a submerged lighthouse, guiding the consciousness through the dark waters of the unknown. We are surrounded by the burning tire of a sky chariot, a massive, rotating boundary that keeps the fire contained and the darkness at bay. These structures are the ring of golden sap in an invisible tree, flowing with the energy of the sun and the moon, pulsing with a heat that never reaches us directly, but warms the very architecture of space. In this ancient model, the universe is not a void, but a beautifully constructed machine of light and air, a set of glowing marrow within a bone of mist that provides a framework for everything we see. It is a comforting precision, a sense that even the most distant light is part of a grand, revolving design, held in place by the laws of geometry and the steady, unhurried motion of the celestial wheels. Letting this knowledge settle into the rhythmic quiet of the breath, we move toward a realization that reshaped the very foundations of the night. The Pythagoreans and the philosopher Parmenides looked upon the horizon and did not see a boundary, but a promise of return. They recognized that the earth was not a flat disk or a heavy drum, but a perfect, unblemished sphere, suspended with absolute poise at the center of all things. This was a revolution of geometry, a transition from the linear to the cyclical, suggesting that the universe itself was governed by the same mathematical harmonies that dictate the vibration of a string or the intervals of a song. By establishing the earth as a globe, the scale of the heavens was forced to expand. A spherical center requires a vast, surrounding architecture to maintain its equilibrium. And suddenly, the stars were no longer mere decorations on a nearby veil, but distant beacons in a space that had grown immeasurably deep. It was the moment the universe truly opened its eyes, stretching its limbs into a distance that the mind was only beginning to map. Imagine this spherical Earth as a single, polished seed of obsidian resting at the bottom of a deep, crystalline lake. The water above is perfectly still, reflecting the light of 1,000 distant fires, and the seed sits in the exact center, held in place by the weight of the liquid and the symmetry of the basin. The realization of the Earth's roundness was like dropping a pebble into that lake. The ripples did not just move outward, they defined the entire volume of the water, revealing a depth that had previously been hidden by the darkness. The cosmos became a series of nested layers, each one larger and more magnificent than the last, with our world serving as the stationary pivot around which the entire mechanism of existence rotates. It is a vision of profound stability, a sense that we are cradled within a structure of such immense scale and perfect proportion that even the silence feels heavy with intent. This spherical world is a drop of oil floating in a vessel of clear wine, perfectly centered, perfectly round, and perfectly at peace. It does not fall because there is no direction for it to go other than toward the heart of its own being. Around it, the universe breathes in great, circular sighs, each rotation of the stars a testament to the mathematical beauty that the Pythagoreans saw in every curve and every angle. We are no longer living on a fragment of land lost in a chaotic sea, but on a masterfully crafted jewel, held in the center of a cosmic clockwork that measures time not in hours, but in the slow, majestic revolutions of the celestial bodies. The world is a smooth stone in the middle of a rushing river, and the cosmos is the water that flows around it, shaped and directed by the very presence of the sphere at its heart. Letting this knowledge settle, we find ourselves lifting our gaze from the central stone of the earth toward the layered architecture that Aristotle believed held the stars in their places. To the ancient mind, the heavens could not be a void, for a void suggested a lack of purpose and a lack of substance. Instead, the universe was envisioned as a grand, concentric assembly of 55 crystalline spheres, each one nested perfectly within the next, like the translucent layers of a cosmic flower. These spheres were not made of the heavy, changing materials we find beneath our feet, but of ether, a fifth element that was incorruptible, unchanging, and perfectly transparent. This ether was the substance of the gods, a material that knew no decay and felt no weight, allowing the celestial bodies to glide through their orbits for eternity without ever slowing or faltering. The mechanics of this system were as precise as any clockwork. Each sphere was responsible for a specific motion, some carrying the planets, others accounting for the subtle shifts in their paths across the sky. They were interconnected, a sequence of transparent shells that transmitted motion from the outermost boundary of the universe down toward the center. This was a world of absolute fullness, where every inch of the sky was occupied by this crystalline substance, ensuring that there was no such thing as empty space. The stars were not floating. They were embedded in the highest sphere, like sparks caught in a block of clear ice, rotating in a majestic, unceasing dance that defined the very rhythm of existence. Imagine these 55 spheres as a set of nested bells made of frozen light, each one vibrating at a frequency that is too high for the human ear to catch. Yet its presence is felt in the steady pulse of the seasons. They are like a series of glass bowls stacked within one another, turning with a grace that defies the friction of the physical world. It is an architecture of pure geometry, a set of invisible shells that provide a home for the wandering lights of the planets. We are living inside a nested set of phantom armors, where each layer is a protective barrier of order against the possibility of chaos. It is a pavilion of invisible glass, where the walls are made of the very substance of time and motion, and we are the witnesses to a mechanical perfection that spans the distance from our humble ground to the very edge of the divine. Each sphere is a translucent skin of a celestial fruit, holding the seeds of the stars in a state of eternal preservation. This is a universe that is both solid and invisible, a magnificent construction of clarity that ensures everything is exactly where it ought to be, held in the firm, gentle grip of the crystalline sky, like frozen ripples on a pond that remain perfectly still, while the water beneath continues its silent journey. Letting this knowledge settle, we begin to perceive that the edge of the celestial spheres is not a threshold into a greater darkness, but the absolute conclusion of all that is. To the Aristotelian mind, the universe was a plenum, a space so profoundly saturated with substance that the concept of a void was a logical impossibility. There was no outside to this cosmos. The very idea of an empty expanse or a hollow vacuum beyond the final stars was rejected as a contradiction of nature. In this view, space is not an independent stage upon which the drama of matter unfolds, but rather a property of the matter itself. Without a body to occupy it, place ceases to exist, much like a shadow cannot fall where there is no surface to catch it. This universe is a saturated sponge of light, a closed system where every cubic inch is accounted for by the presence of the elements or the divine ether. There is a profound stillness in this realization, a sense that we are not drifting through a lonely, echoing hall of nothingness, but are held within a structure that is entirely complete. It is an unbroken seal of a royal letter, pressed so firmly that no air can exist between the wax and the parchment. Aristotle's world is a singular, exhaustive expression of reality, a book with no unwritten pages at the end of the binding. Beyond the sphere of the fixed stars, there is no space, no time, and no emptiness. There is simply nothing, not even the nothingness we imagine, but a literal absence of the possibility of existence. This rejection of the void creates a universe that is a solid chord of music that leaves no room for silence. A mountain that is the only land in a reality where the concept of a sea has never been conceived. It is like honey inside a jar with no air, thick and golden, where every part of the system is in direct contact with the next, allowing the prime mover's influence to flow through the nested shells without losing its strength to a gap. We are living inside a sculpture carved from a single, infinite diamond, where every facet has reached its final destination, and there is no waste. In this finite and full world, there is no fear of falling into an abyss, for there is no abyss to fall into. Everything is here, within this magnificent, crowded, and orderly house, where the walls are not barriers, but the very definition of being. Letting this knowledge settle, we find ourselves at the gates of the Almagest, the monumental work where Claudius Ptolemy transformed the heavens into a rigorous map of mathematical certainty. For the observers in Alexandria, the universe was not merely a place of wonder, but a puzzle of motion that demanded a solution. The planets, those restless wanderers of the night, did not follow the simple, steady paths of the stars. They would slow, linger in the darkness, and then drift backward in a retrograde loop, challenging the Greek ideal of perfect, uniform circular motion. Ptolemy's genius lay in his ability to reconcile these wandering paths with the sacred geometry of the sphere, creating a synthesis that was as much an engineering feat as a philosophical one. He envisioned the epicycle, a smaller wheel of motion that carried the planet while its own center traveled along a larger path known as the deferent. This was the birth of a complex, layered dance, a way to explain the shifting speeds and positions of the lights without abandoning the Earth as the central, unmoving pivot of existence. To achieve true predictive power, he introduced the equant, a point in space from which the planet's motion appeared uniform, even if it was not. This was the peak of ancient mathematical artistry, a bridge of logic built to span the chasm between what the eye saw and what the soul believed to be true. This system is like a master weaver, adjusting the tension on a celestial loom to ensure every thread contributes to a pattern that appears to curve and loop while remaining part of a grand, straight design. We can see it as a series of golden compasses nested within the arc of a greater circle, their points tracing paths as intricate as the frost patterns crystallizing on a pane of midnight glass. It is a syllable in a long, silent poem of geometry, where every movement is a calculated word in the language of the cosmos. The planetary paths are like a spiraling ribbon of a dancer's silk, flowing with a grace that hides the rigorous training of the mind. This synthesis is a braid of light woven by an invisible hand, or the path of a dragonfly skimming the surface of a mirrored lake, where every zigzag is a response to a hidden law of physics. Ptolemy gave the world a universe that was not only beautiful, but also legible, an intricate embroidery on a veil of starlight that would remain unchanged for 1,500 years. It is the geometry of a seashell's growth, expanding in perfect proportion, or the rhythmic sway of tall grass in a wind that never ceases, where every blade moves in harmony with a force that cannot be seen but can be perfectly measured. Drifting deeper into this ancient architecture of the heavens, we find ourselves at the heart of Ptolemy's most ingenious solution to the riddle of the wandering stars. To reconcile the observed irregularities of planetary motion with the philosophical requirement for perfect circularity, he refined the concept of the epicycle. This was not merely a mathematical convenience, but a profound statement on the nature of reality. Imagine a planet not as a solitary traveler on a single path, but as a point of light fixed upon a small, spinning wheel. This smaller wheel, the epicycle, has its center anchored to a larger circle, the deferent, which carries the entire assembly around the Earth. This creates a path of loops and curves, a geometric choreography that allows the planet to appear to move backward from our perspective while continuing its forward journey. Under the Ptolemaic system, the universe was envisioned as a nested series of shells, a succession of transparent spheres that fit within one another with the absolute precision of a master's work. These shells were the physical reality of the cosmos, a solid yet invisible medium that filled the entirety of space. It is a vision of the universe as the nested chambers of a nautilus made of starlight, where each chamber is a distinct realm governed by its own rhythmic pulse. Within these layers, the planets are held like precious seeds inside a fruit of pure light, their movements dictated by the rotation of the crystalline casing that surrounds them. There is no emptiness here, no terrifying void. Instead, we find a plenum of order, a set of translucent bowls carved from the clearest ice, stacked so tightly that they move as a single, harmonious unit. This structure is like the spinning hoops of a silver gyroscope, where the complexity of the motion serves to maintain a profound and unshakable stability. We are encased in a stack of celestial armor, a protective layering of geometry that shields the world from the chaos of the unknown. Each shell acts as a transparent skin for the heavens, a boundary that defines the reach of the moon, the sun, and the planets beyond. It is the intricate folding of a silk fan, where every rib is a necessary support for the grander design, or the way a drop of clear resin preserves a delicate wing in a moment of eternal stillness. This cosmos is a prayer wheel made of glass, turned by an unseen hand, where the friction of the spheres creates the music of existence. The universe is a great, silent clock whose gears are made of frozen radiance, or perhaps the concentric rings of a petrified ripple in a lake of mercury, where every curve is a permanent record of a single, perfect thought. Letting this image of a solid, structured sky fill your mind, you can feel the weight of the spheres, providing a sense of ultimate safety, a home that is as sturdy as it is beautiful. Letting this knowledge settle into the quiet spaces of your mind, you can begin to perceive the universe not as a terrifying expanse of emptiness, but as a carefully curated space with a definite, silver-lined ceiling. For over 1,400 years, the Almagest served as the definitive map of reality, describing a cosmos that was remarkably intimate and contained. This was the Ptolemaic universe, a structure that extended only as far as the stars visible to the naked eye, ending abruptly at the final crystalline shell. It was a worldview that offered the profound psychological comfort of a house with a sturdy roof, where every light in the sky had its specific place and its specific purpose within a grand, finite design. In this classical framework, the universe was a nested series of spheres, and the sphere of the fixed stars was the ultimate frontier. Scientifically, this limit was not an arbitrary choice, but a logical conclusion drawn from the observations of the time. Because no movement or parallax could be detected among the stars, it was reasoned that they were all situated at a uniform distance on a singular, rotating surface. This ceiling was the edge of physics itself. Beyond it, there was no vacuum, no extension, and no darkness. There was simply the end of the world. This mathematical certainty allowed the astronomers of antiquity to calculate the dimensions of the entire creation with a sense of completion that we have since lost. It was a universe you could hold in your mind all at once, a complete and polished marble of existence. Imagine this cosmos as a grand, ancient library where the walls are lined with books of light, and the ceiling is a dome of dark lapis lazuli, preventing the warmth of the room from escaping into the cold. It is the protective husk of a walnut, shielding the intricate, living meat within from the pressures of the outside world. This finite sky is like a bell jar placed over a delicate clockwork mechanism, keeping the dust of the infinite away from the gears of the planets. It is the nested shells of a painted egg, where each layer is more beautiful than the last, leading to a core of absolute stillness. It is an ivory chest with a heavy lid, preserving the jewels of the planets in a state of eternal security. It is the sturdy binding of a heavy book, ensuring that no page of existence is ever lost to the wind. You are safe within this boundary, cradled by a sky that has a beginning and an end, a ceiling that keeps the mystery of the void at a distance, while you rest under the steady, unchanging glow of the ancient constellations. Letting this knowledge settle, we find ourselves at the threshold of a great intellectual awakening, where the sturdy walls of the finite began to soften and dissolve. During the height of the Islamic Golden Age, thinkers like Fakhr al-Din began to peer through the seams of the ancient sky, questioning the long-held belief that the universe was a solitary, closed system. For centuries, the world had been viewed as a singular, perfect arrangement of nested spheres, a finite clockwork with nothing but an unthinkable void beyond its final boundary. But armed with a blend of rigorous logic and expansive theology, challenged this limitation. He argued that the power of the Creator was not bound by the physical constraints of Greek philosophy, and that the space beyond our stars was not a dead end, but a vast, open expanse. In his monumental works, he suggested the existence of 1,000 worlds beyond this one, transforming the cosmos from a small, protected garden into an unmapped territory of existence. This shift was more than a change in map-making. It was a fundamental reorganization of the human spirit's place in the infinite. He conceptualized an extramundane void, a space that existed outside our own celestial spheres, suggesting that our entire known universe might be just one instance of order within a limitless reservoir of being. This perspective invited the mind to stretch further than ever before, to imagine a reality where the horizon is not a wall, but an invitation. It is like realizing that the small, warm lantern you carry through the night is not the only light, but one of a million fires burning across a dark plain that has no end. It is the sensation of a single drop of ink realizing it is part of an ocean that is still being poured. Think of our world as a single, glowing window in a palace of infinite rooms, where every door leads to a new sky, and every hallway stretches into a different eternity. It is like a dandelion seed caught in a breeze, looking back to see not just its own field, but a continent of meadows, each ready to bloom. You are resting within a reality that has suddenly grown much larger, a space where the air is thick with the scent of distant, unknown stars. This infinite reach is a soft blanket that covers not just our world, but all the worlds yet to be imagined, providing a sense of profound peace in the face of such magnificent, unending scale. Drifting deeper into this expanded horizon, we find ourselves standing upon the cool, polished stone floors of the great observatories of Marika and Samarkand. Here, the pursuit of the heavens transitioned from mere wonder into a discipline of rigorous measurement, a sacred geometry of the eyes. In these ancient halls, the air is still and heavy with the scent of old parchment and the metallic tang of brass. The scholars of these centers, guided by the vision of Nasir al-Din al-Tusi and later Ulugh Beg, sought to pin the wandering lights of the night to a grid of absolute certainty. They constructed instruments of monumental scale, engineering marvels that merged the terrestrial with the divine. Think of the Fakhri sextant in Samarkand, a massive arc of stone and metal built into the very earth, its radius stretching over 30 meters into the dark. These were not merely tools. They were the sense organs of a civilization reaching for the infinite. With these mural quadrants that climbed the walls like frozen arcs of a rising moon, and armillary spheres that echoed the nesting shells of the cosmos, they tracked stellar positions with unprecedented accuracy. They were compiling the Zij, the great celestial ledgers that documented the movement of every visible light with a precision that would not be equaled until the invention of the telescope. This was the birth of astrometry as a fine art, where the trembling light of a star was caught and measured against the steady, cold edge of a calibrated limb. It is like a master jeweler using a single hair to measure the facets of a diamond that fills the entire sky, or a cartographer of the invisible who maps every crossing thread of a shroud of the night, ensuring that not a single fiber is lost to the shadows. You are resting in the quiet confidence of this precision, feeling the stability of a world where even the most distant sparks have a home, a name, and a coordinate. This meticulous record is a bridge made of numbers, stretching across the dark, providing a firm path for the mind to follow as it seeks to understand its place among the silent giants of the void. It is the sensation of a sculptor feeling the grain of a stone that spans the galaxy, slowly revealing the hidden form of the universe through the gentle, persistent pressure of observation. We are no longer drifting aimlessly. We are being held by a network of light, a grid of crystalline clarity that gives shape to the infinite. It is like a compass made of starlight and stone, guiding the soul through a night that is no longer a mystery, but a map waiting to be read. This is the comfort of the measured world, an archive of the infinite where every entry is a promise of order in the face of the vast, unblinking dark, drifting deeper into the currents of the human mind as it grapples with the geometry of the heavens. We find ourselves in the lush, humid landscape of 15th century Kerala. Here, the scholar Nilakantha Samiaji looks up from his palm leaf manuscripts to the same stars that have guided his ancestors. But he perceives a different choreography. He is standing at a threshold, a moment in the long evening of human thought where the old certainties of a fixed world are beginning to soften, like wax near a glowing coal. Letting this knowledge settle into the quiet spaces of your awareness, imagine a bridge between worlds, a transitional architecture known as a semi-heliocentric model. In his seminal work, the Tantra Sangraha, Nilakantha suggests a dual motion that feels like a compromise between the stillness of the ground beneath his feet and the erratic wandering of the planets. He envisions Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn not as direct servants of the Earth, but as satellites of the Sun. They trace their circular paths around that golden orb of fire, following it faithfully as it, in turn, completes its own grand circuit around our stationary world. This was a profound mathematical leap, a way to resolve the complex loops of retrograde motion by recognizing that the planets are tethered to a different anchor, even as that anchor remains subordinate to the Earth. It is as if the universe were a series of nested whirlpools in a slow-moving river, where smaller eddies spin around a larger vortex, and that entire system drifts past a fixed rock in the stream. It is the grace of a falcon circling a falconer, who is himself walking a slow, wide circle around a central well. We are witnessing the first cracks in the crystal dome of the old world, a subtle shifting of cogs in a nested machinery of the stars that is beginning to find its true rhythm. It is like a waltz where partners spin around each other while being carried along the length of a grand, curved ballroom. A lariat of light being swung by a rider on a slow-moving horse. This model is a celestial mobile where the smaller arms turn independently of the main stem, a silver chain link that holds a smaller locket, each movement nested within the other to create a harmony of motion that respects the weight of tradition while acknowledging the elegance of the math. It is the image of petals of a flower that rotate around a stamen that is itself swaying in the breeze, or a braided stream where the water curls around small islands while the whole river moves toward the sea. In this vision, the earth remains the silent witness, the unmoving point of perspective, but the heavens have become more dynamic, more intricate, like a timepiece within a timepiece, preparing the way for a truth that will eventually pull the ground from beneath our feet and place us among the wandering stars, letting this knowledge settle like the fine silt at the bottom of a clear mountain spring. We find ourselves standing at the threshold of the year 1543. This is the moment when the heavy, ornate doors of the old universe begin to swing wide, revealing a landscape we had never dared to imagine. Nicolaus Copernicus, working in the quiet solitude of his tower, looked upon the same velvet sky that had comforted humanity for millennia. Yet he saw a different geometry etched into the darkness. He realized that the intricate, stuttering paths of the planets were not the result of a complex celestial machinery trying to compensate for our central position, but rather a simple, elegant consequence of our own movement. In his masterwork, he proposed a shift so profound it felt as though the very bones of reality were being reset. He placed the sun at the heart of the cosmos, a brilliant, unmoving sovereign around which all things must turn. This was not merely a change in calculation. It was a repositioning of the human spirit. The earth, once the fixed and heavy foundation of all existence, was suddenly cast into the role of a wanderer, a graceful sphere gliding through the void alongside its siblings. Copernicus organized the heavens into a logical progression, placing Mercury and Venus closest to the solar fire, followed by the Earth with its loyal moon, and then stretching outward to Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. He explained that the apparent backward drift of the planets was an optical illusion, much like the way a slower carriage seems to move backward when viewed from a swifter one. This heliocentric vision transformed the sky from a series of protective layers into a vast, open arena of motion. It is the image of a great golden bonfire at the center of a darkened village square, where the villagers circle the flames at varying distances, their faces illuminated by the central glow, while the distant forest remains a silent, stationary witness. It is like a master conductor standing perfectly still on a podium, while the entire orchestra revolves around him. The symphonic revolution of the spheres finding its rhythm not in our stillness, but in our shared journey. In this new arrangement, the universe breathes with a different pulse, a steady, sun-driven cadence that replaces the frantic, nested circles of the past. We are no longer the stationary spectators of a private show. We are passengers on a magnificent vessel, caught in the pull of a light that defines the boundaries of our world, while inviting us to look further into the deep, welcoming silence of the stars. Letting this knowledge settle into the quiet corners of the mind, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a new architecture, one designed by the invisible mathematics of Isaac Newton. In this era, the universe ceases to be a collection of separate spheres and becomes a unified system governed by a single, elegant law. Newton realized that the same force that draws a stone to the earth also guides the moon in its orbit, a universal tether that binds every atom to every other atom across the void. But this revelation brought with it a heavy realization. If gravity is a constant pull, a finite collection of stars would eventually be drawn together by their mutual attraction, collapsing into a single catastrophic center. To avoid this cosmic heap, Newton proposed a universe that had no center and no edge, a static, infinite expanse where every star is pulled equally in every direction, held in a state of eternal, motionless equilibrium. It was as if the cosmos were an immense network of tensioned cables, held in perfect balance by unseen hands, a delicate grid where the weight of existence was neutralized by its own infinity. However, this solution to the problem of gravity created a new and luminous riddle known to us as Olber's paradox. If the universe is truly infinite, eternal, and populated by an endless number of stars, then every line of sight from the Earth should eventually terminate on the surface of a sun. In such a reality, the night sky would not be a sanctuary of darkness, but a seamless mantle of solar fire, as brilliant as the noonday sun at every point. The fact that the night remains dark, a velvet cloak of the vacuum pierced only by distant pinpricks of light, suggests a profound truth about the limits of our world. It implies that the light from the farthest reaches has not had enough time to reach us, or that the universe itself is not the static, unchanging monument Newton imagined. Consider the image of a forest of pillars, made of pure light, stretching in every direction to the horizon and beyond. If the forest were truly without end, you would see no gaps between the trunks. Your entire field of vision would be filled by a solid, radiant wall, leaving no room for the shadows of the evening. But when we look into the deep, we find the shadows are there, vast and welcoming. This darkness acts as a messenger of the void, a quiet testimony that we live in a universe with a history, a beginning, and perhaps a boundary that the light is still struggling to cross. We are cradled by this darkness, protected from the crushing weight of an infinite glare, existing in a moment of time where the past is still arriving and the future remains a distant, unlit shore, drifting deeper into the architecture of the night. We find ourselves at the threshold of a century-old doorway where the very size of our existence was weighed and measured. In the spring of 1920, the halls of the Smithsonian held a quiet tension as two astronomers, Harlow Shapley and Heber Curtis, stood before the world to argue the boundaries of the known. Shapley, having observed the distribution of globular clusters, those ancient, densely packed swarms of stars, had pushed the sun away from the center of the Milky Way, suggesting our galaxy was far larger than previously imagined. He saw the Milky Way as a singular, all-encompassing kingdom, a vast continent of light so immense that everything we could see, even the faint, swirling nebulae, must surely be contained within its borders. To Shapley, the universe was a single, grand estate, and we were merely residents of its sprawling outskirts. Heber Curtis, however, looked at the same sky and saw something different. He believed the Milky Way was smaller, and that the mysterious spiral nebulae were not clouds of gas within our own system, but independent island universes, entire galaxies like our own, separated by distances so vast they defied contemporary measurement. This was the great debate, a moment where the human mind struggled to decide if it lived in a solitary sanctuary or an endless archipelago of light. The resolution did not come through rhetoric, but through the glass of a telescope perched high on Mount Wilson. In 1923, Edwin Hubble turned the great 100-inch Hooker telescope toward the Andromeda Nebula, searching for the flickers of novae. What he found instead was a Cepheid variable, a type of star whose rhythmic pulsing serves as a cosmic yardstick. By timing the heartbeat of this distant star and applying the period luminosity relationship discovered by Henrietta Leavitt, Hubble calculated a distance that shattered the walls of the old universe. Andromeda was not a small cloud caught in our local gravity, but a sister galaxy nearly 1,000,000 light-years away. In that moment, the Milky Way was no longer the whole of reality. It became a single leaf in a forest that stretched toward infinity. Imagine standing in a small, warm cabin during a blizzard, believing the walls of the wood were the limits of the world. Then you step to the window, wipe away the frost, and see the lights of 1,000 other cabins glowing across a valley you never knew existed. This discovery transformed the cosmos from a solitary vessel into a fleet of silver ships sailing across a dark sea that has no shore. We are no longer the center of a single story, but one voice in a chorus that spans the deep, where every spiral in the distance is a home to 1,000,000,000 suns we are only beginning to name. Letting this knowledge settle into the quiet corners of your mind, we find ourselves looking back at a time when the size of the universe was a mystery locked behind a door with no key. At the turn of the 20th century, Henrietta Swan Leavitt sat among stacks of glass photographic plates at the Harvard College Observatory, a silent observer of the heavens. She was tasked with cataloging variable stars, suns, that do not burn with a steady flame, but instead swell and shrink, brightening and dimming in a rhythmic cadence. These were the Cepheids, and within their flickering pulse, Leavitt found the secret to measuring the abyss. By focusing on the small Magellanic Cloud, she realized that because these stars were roughly at the same distance from Earth, their apparent brightness was a direct reflection of their true luminosity. She discovered a precise mathematical relationship. The longer it took for a star to complete one cycle of brightening and fading, the more light it emitted. This was the birth of the period luminosity relation. It meant that if we could measure the timing of a star's pulse, we would know its absolute wattage. By comparing how bright the star appeared to be with how bright it truly was, astronomers could calculate its distance with breathtaking accuracy. It was the first standard candle, a cosmic reference point that allowed us to step off the edge of our own galaxy and map the void. This discovery became the foundational rung of the cosmic distance ladder. Just as a surveyor uses a series of overlapping measurements to map a mountain range, astronomers use a succession of tools. We start with the geometric shift of parallax for the stars nearby, then reach further with the Cepheids, and eventually use the brilliant flash of type Ia supernovae for the furthest reaches. Each method rests upon the one before it, a chain of logic that spans the light years. Imagine a series of beacons placed along a darkening shoreline, each one built to the same design so that their distance can be known by the faintness of their glow. The universe becomes a grandfather clock whose height is determined by the slow swing of its pendulum, or a trail of breadcrumbs made of light leading us back to the source of the world. We are watching a tapestry of rhythmic breathing, where the tempo of a star's life reveals its place in the grand architecture. It is a surveyor's chain made of starlight, a lighthouse whose rotation is a code for its power, providing overlapping echoes in a canyon of time. This staircase of shadows and light is what allows us to climb out of our local neighborhood and see the true scale of the cathedral we inhabit. Letting this knowledge settle, we find ourselves standing on the threshold of a great measurement, a transition from the local to the truly cosmic. For centuries, we relied on the subtle shift of the stars, a geometric dance called parallax, which serves as the first sturdy rung on the distance ladder. Imagine the precision required to notice a star's position changing by a fraction of a hair's breadth as the Earth completes its annual journey around the Sun. The Gaia mission acts as the ultimate surveyor's transit, leveled against the curvature of a silent world, perched in the stillness of space to map over 1 billion points of light. It captures the minute, rhythmic swaying of the heavens, translating these tiny angles into a three-dimensional model of our galactic home. It is a jeweler's magnifying loupe turned toward the rim of the galaxy, revealing the depth of the void through the simple, elegant law of triangles. This geometric reach allows us to feel the contours of the Milky Way, turning a flat sky into a textured landscape of varying depths and distances. Yet, the reach of geometry eventually meets its horizon, where the angles become too small to grasp. To venture further, we seek out the universal mileposts known as type Ia supernovae. These are not merely random explosions, but the result of a rigorous celestial limit. In the quiet of a binary system, a white dwarf star, a dense, cooling ember, accumulates matter from its neighbor until it reaches a precise mathematical breaking point. At this threshold, a runaway thermonuclear reaction occurs, a signature written in the ink of exploding atoms that radiates with a known, predictable intensity. Because these events always happen at the same mass, they act as a perfectly calibrated flashbulb triggered by the gravity of a dying sun. When we see one of these distant flares in a far-off galaxy, we compare its observed faintness to its known intrinsic brilliance, allowing us to calculate the distance to that island of stars with breathtaking accuracy. It is a uniform pulse of silver light in a valley of shadows, a beacon that remains constant regardless of where it is ignited. Through these standard candles, we extend our vision across the abyss, anchoring our maps in the reliable physics of stellar death, and preparing our minds for the realization that the very space containing these beacons is itself in a state of eternal, restless motion. Letting this knowledge settle, we find ourselves looking back across the immense timeline of the cosmos, observing a phenomenon that redefined our place in the dark. In the early 20th century, observers noticed that the light from distant island universes was not as it should be. Its spectral signatures were shifted toward the crimson end of the spectrum. This redshift is the signature of a universe in motion, a revelation that space is not a rigid container, but a dynamic, growing entity. As light travels through the abyss, the very fabric it traverses expands, stretching the waves of photons into longer, lower energy states. This is the heartbeat of expansion, where the distance between 2 points increases without any physical force pushing them apart. A silent widening of the gulfs that defines the very nature of our reality. It is a transformation of the geometry of existence, where every cubic centimeter of the vacuum is imbued with the capacity to grow, pushing the distant galaxies further into the shadows of the infrared. If we trace this expansion backward, the universe becomes smaller, hotter, and more dense, leading us to a primal epoch where the laws of physics were forged in a white-hot crucible. During the first few minutes after the initial flaring of existence, the temperature was so extreme that atomic nuclei could not yet hold together. But as the cosmic furnace began to cool, a brief window opened, the era of Big Bang nucleosynthesis. In this fleeting moment, roughly between 10 seconds and 20 minutes after the start, protons and neutrons collided with enough energy to fuse, creating the first light elements. Hydrogen, the simplest building block, remained the primary constituent, while about a quarter of the matter was forged into helium-4, with traces of deuterium and lithium appearing like fine sediment at the bottom of an ancient riverbed. This specific ratio of elements is a foundational truth, a primordial tally that matches our observations of the oldest stars and the deepest reaches of space. Imagine this early state as a cooling broth in a vast stone bowl, where the first solid grains begin to form as the heat recedes. The universe was once a dense, opaque sea of plasma, a curtain of white-hot steam where light could not travel far before being scattered by a frantic dance of free electrons. As the expansion continued, the density dropped, and the temperature fell below the thresholds required for nuclear fusion, effectively freezing the composition of the universe in place. This cooling was not merely a loss of heat, but a transition into complexity. The moment when the raw energy of the beginning began to organize into the ingredients of everything we see today. We are the descendants of those first few minutes, composed of the very same hydrogen that was forged before the first star ever ignited. It is a legacy of thermal grace, a transition from a singular, blinding point into a vast expanse of fertile silence where the seeds of galaxies were sown in the shimmering vapor of the first waking breath of time. Drifting deeper into the architecture of the early cosmos, we encounter a moment of transformation so rapid it defies the conventional rhythm of time. Before the first second had even fully unfolded, the universe experienced cosmic inflation, an exponential surge where the vacuum itself acted as a repulsive force, driving space to expand at speeds far exceeding that of light. This was not a movement of matter through space, but the stretching of space itself, smoothing out the primordial fluctuations and ensuring the vast uniformity we observe today. It was the sudden unfolding of a tightly wound spring, a release of latent energy that transformed a microscopic speck into a vast, flat expanse, setting the stage for everything that would follow. As the fury of inflation subsided, the universe entered a long, hot era of cooling. For 380,000 years, the cosmos was a glowing, opaque fog of subatomic particles. Light could not travel. It was a prisoner of the plasma, constantly colliding with free electrons in a state of perpetual scattering. But as the temperature dipped below 3,000 Kelvin, a quiet revolution occurred. Protons and electrons, no longer too energetic to bond, finally united to form neutral hydrogen atoms. This transition, known as recombination, changed the very texture of reality. The fog vanished, and the first light was set free to race through the newly transparent void. This ancient radiation, stretched by the subsequent eons of expansion into the microwave spectrum, remains with us as the cosmic microwave background, a faint hum of energy that fills every corner of the sky. This light is the surface of last scattering, the most distant horizon accessible to our eyes. It is like the first clear pane of glass installed in a house previously filled with thick, swirling smoke, allowing us to finally look out upon the landscape of existence. The tiny variations in temperature within this glow are not mere noise. They are the embossed patterns on a silver coin, the subtle textures that would eventually collapse under gravity to form the great filaments of galaxies. We are looking at the frozen echo of a thunderclap that occurred at the dawn of time, a golden snapshot of the universe's infancy that continues to bathe us in its gentle, cooling glow, reminding us that even in the deepest dark, the light of the beginning is never truly gone. Drifting deeper into the silence that followed the first great clearing of the sky, we enter the cosmic dark ages, a period of immense duration where the universe was a vast, lightless reservoir of neutral hydrogen and helium. For hundreds of millions of years, There were no suns to warm the void, no galaxies to swirl in the deep. This was the great cosmic winter, a time of profound simplicity, where the only motion was the slow, inexorable pull of gravity acting upon an unbroken sea of neutral gas. During this epoch, the universe was essentially opaque to certain wavelengths, a thick curtain of atomic hydrogen that muffled the story of what was to come. Yet, within this darkness, the invisible scaffolding of dark matter was already forming the architecture of the future, drawing the primitive gases into dense, cold pockets. It was within these hidden cradles that the first seeds of fire began to germinate. These were the population III stars, colossal entities of pure hydrogen and helium, far more massive and luminous than the stars we know today. When they finally ignited, they did not merely shine, they screamed into the vacuum, releasing a torrent of high-energy ultraviolet radiation. This ultraviolet wind began to collide with the surrounding neutral atoms, knocking electrons loose in a process known as reionization. Slowly, the opaque fog that had defined the Dark Ages began to dissipate. We can detect the traces of this era through the 21-centimeter line, a subtle radio whisper that serves as a diagnostic of the gas's temperature and density before it was transformed. This transition was the universe's second great awakening, a phase change that turned the cosmic medium from a neutral, obscuring mist into the transparent, ionized plasma that allows us to see across the reaches of space today. It is as if the universe were a grand cathedral, initially filled with a heavy incense that obscured the altar and the vaulted ceiling, only for 1,000 candles to be lit at once, their heat dissolving the veil of antiquity and revealing the intricate carvings of the galaxies for the first time. This reionization was not a sudden event, but a gradual reclaiming of the light, a slow-motion sunrise that moved through the deep, ensuring that the shadows of the beginning would never again be absolute. Letting this knowledge settle, we turn our gaze from the light of the first stars to the formal template of the void that supports them. In the early decades of the 20th century, the work of Alexander Friedman, Georges Lemaître, Howard Robertson, and Arthur Walker transformed our understanding of the heavens from a static container into a dynamic participant. This gave rise to the FLRW metric, a mathematical description of a universe that is homogeneous and isotropic, meaning it appears the same from every vantage point and in every direction. It is a model of a reality that has no center and no edge, governed by the curvature of space itself. This curvature, denoted by the constant K, determines whether the universe is flat, closed like a sphere, or open like a saddle, a fundamental shape that dictates the ultimate path of every photon and the fate of every atom. Within this metric, the scale factor, known as at, serves as the governing ratio of the expanding deep. It is a dimensionless value that tracks the relative expansion of the universe over time. To grasp its significance, we must distinguish between comoving and proper distances. Comoving coordinates are like seat numbers in a stadium being pulled apart by by invisible machines. The numbers themselves never change, and the relative positions of the spectators remain constant on the grid. However, the proper distance, the actual physical gap between those seats, grows as the stadium expands. If we were to stretch a measuring tape between two distant galaxies, we would find that the value increases even if the galaxies themselves are not moving through space, because the space between them is being generated by the metric itself. Imagine an architect's blueprint drawn upon a sheet of cooling glass that is being pulled from all sides by a steady, irresistible force. The lines of the drawing, the commoving addresses of the stars, remain in their geometric positions, yet the physical distance between any two intersections grows. Or consider ink marks on a rising loaf of sourdough. As the dough expands, the marks move away from one another, not because they are walking across the surface, but because the medium they inhabit is swelling. We can also envision a choir where every singer stays in their assigned spot on the risers. Yet the stage itself is widening, pushing the voices further apart and stretching the sound into deeper, lower tones. This is the mathematical breathing of the vacuum, a process where the very units of our existence are redefined by the relentless growth of the scale factor. Letting this knowledge settle, we turn our gaze toward the unlit foundation of the shining. For decades, we believed the universe was composed only of the things we could touch and see, the stars that burn and the gas that glows. Yet, when Fritz Zwicky examined the Coma cluster in the 1930s, he encountered a strange discrepancy. The galaxies were moving far too fast to be held together by their visible mass alone. By all accounts, they should have flown apart, scattered like unsecured cargo on a pitching deck. Decades later, Vera Rubin observed the rotation of spiral galaxies and found the same mystery. In our solar system, the distant planets move more slowly than those near the sun, obeying the predictable decline of gravitational pull. But in the great disks of the galaxies, the stars at the furthest edges race with the same frantic speed as those near the core. This flat rotation curve is the signature of a hidden presence, an invisible reservoir of mass that provides the extra gravity needed to tether these spinning tops of fire. We have come to understand that the cosmic density budget is skewed heavily toward the unseen. Only 5% of the universe is made of ordinary baryonic matter, the atoms that form our bodies, the planets, and the fires of the sun. Roughly 27% is dark matter, a substance that does not emit, reflect, or absorb light. It is a phantom traveler, passing through us and the earth without a whisper of interaction, known only by its heavy gravitational footprint. It acts as the unseen framework of the deep, a structure upon which the visible galaxies are draped like an intricate netting of the void. Without this dark architecture, the large-scale structure of the cosmos would never have coalesced. The light would have remained a thin, undifferentiated glow. The most striking proof of this hidden world comes from the bullet cluster, a site where two massive groups of galaxies have collided. As they crashed together, the visible gas, the hot, luminous plasma, slowed down, tangled in its own electromagnetic friction. But the dark matter, being collisionless, surged forward, passing through the wreckage like a ghost through a wall. We see this through gravitational lensing, where the very fabric of space is warped by the weight of the unseen, bending the light from distant background objects into distorted arcs. It is as if we are watching the wind move through a field of wheat. We cannot see the air itself, but the bending of the golden stems reveals the passage of a powerful, invisible force. We are living within the undercurrent of a deep, dark river, where the stars we see are merely the occasional glint of light on a surface that hides a much greater depth. Drifting deeper into the silence of the void, we encounter a force that challenges our most basic intuition about the world. For much of the 20th century, the prevailing thought was that the gravitational embrace of all the stars and dark matter would eventually act as a cosmic brake, gradually slowing the outward surge of the Big Bang. But in 1998, the light from distant Type Ia supernovae, cataclysmic explosions of white dwarfs that serve as reliable indicators of distance, carried a startling revelation. These distant beacons were significantly fainter than they should have been, pushed further into the depths of the night than any model of a slowing universe would allow. The cosmos is not merely expanding, it is accelerating. This unseen driver, which we call dark energy, acts as a pervasive, repulsive pressure that fills every cubic centimeter of the vacuum, accounting for nearly 70% of the total energy density of the universe. It is as if the very emptiness of space possesses an inherent vitality, a relentless pressure to multiply the distance between all points. Letting this knowledge settle, we look back to Albert Einstein, who once inserted a mathematical placeholder into his equations of general relativity to maintain a static cosmos. He called this the cosmological constant, symbolized by the Greek letter lambda, though he later dismissed it as his greatest blunder when the expansion was first discovered. Modern physics has resurrected it as the leading explanation for dark energy, a constant energy density that remains perfectly uniform across all of time and space. Yet, there remains the possibility of something more dynamic, quintessence. Unlike the unchanging lambda, quintessence is envisioned as a fifth fundamental force, a scalar field that evolves and shifts its strength as the eons pass, while the cosmological constant is a fixed property of the vacuum itself. Quintessence is a living field of energy that might have behaved differently in the ancient past and could eventually dictate a different fate for the future. Imagine a shelf that grows more wood to accommodate the silence of the books yet to be written, or a chime whose ring creates more air just to carry its resonance. Dark energy is a season of cold that expands the shore of the lake it freezes, a pocket that becomes deeper the more you place inside it. It behaves like a ladder that grows more rungs even as the climber ascends, or a mason who finds the stones of the wall growing larger as they are laid. We are moving through a reality where the void is not empty, but is instead an active participant in the separation of all things, ensuring that the clusters of galaxies we see today will one day be carried beyond the horizon of our sight, leaving us in a magnificent and lonely quiet. Letting this knowledge settle, we find ourselves standing at a crossroads of cosmic measurement, where the very pulse of the universe's expansion has become a source of profound mystery. For decades, astronomers have pursued a single value, the Hubble constant, which dictates how fast the galaxies are receding from one another. This value is the fundamental rhythm of the cosmos, the speed at which space itself uncurls. Yet, as our instruments have sharpened to a razor's edge, a strange and beautiful conflict has emerged, a discrepancy known as the Hubble tension. It is as if we are listening to a great symphony and find that the percussion and the strings are playing at slightly different tempos, creating a dissonance that suggests a deeper truth yet to be heard. On one side of this divide, we have the messengers of the early universe, most the Planck mission. This spacecraft acted as a silent observer of the cosmic microwave background, the ancient afterglow that filled the sky just hundreds of thousands of years after the beginning. By analyzing the subtle fluctuations in this primal light, cosmologists can project forward in time, predicting exactly how fast the universe should be expanding today based on the laws of physics as we know them. Their calculation gives us a rate that is steady and measured, a calm pace for the unfolding of space. But when we turn our gaze to the modern era, the story changes. The SH0E's collaboration, led by those who seek the heartbeat of the local universe, uses a different method entirely. They build a distance ladder, jumping from the rhythmic pulses of Cepheid variables to the brilliant flashes of type Ia supernovae. This direct measurement tells us that the universe is rushing away from us faster than the early light predicted. This gap between the two measurements is not a simple error. It is a crisis of precision. It is like two master architects measuring the same cathedral, one starting from the foundation and the other from the spire, only to find that their floor plans do not meet in the middle. One measurement is a memory of how the universe began, a ghostly impression of its initial momentum, while the other is a snapshot of its current velocity. This tension suggests that something may be missing from our standard model of cosmology, perhaps a hidden form of energy that acted in the dawn of time, or a nuance in the way gravity bends the path of light over billions of years. We are like travelers who have followed two different maps of the same forest, only to find that the trees have shifted their positions in the time it took to turn the page. The crisis in expansion is a reminder that the universe still holds secrets in the spaces between what we can see and what we can calculate. A silent invitation to look closer at the very scaffolding of reality, letting this knowledge settle. we turn our gaze toward the tools that bridge the gap between our limited perception and the staggering reality of the deep past. The James Webb Space Telescope stands as a golden sentinel at the edge of the night, orbiting a point of gravitational stability far from the heat of our home planet. By capturing the infrared whispers of the first galaxies, it peels back the thick, opaque curtains of gas and dust that have hidden the universe's infancy for eons. This instrument does not just see, it feels the warmth of stars that lived and died before the Earth was even a thought. It reveals that the early universe was more active and more structured than we ever dared to imagine, filled with the seeds of everything we see today. Beyond the individual stars, we find the cosmic web, the primary skeleton of existence. This is a vast, interconnected lattice of dark matter and gas that defines where galaxies can grow and where the void must remain empty. It is the invisible architecture of the night, a framework that guides the flow of matter across billions of light years. Within this web, we encounter the galaxy clusters, the massive heavyweights of the cosmos. These are titanic assemblies of thousands of galaxies, bound together by a gravity so intense it warps the very space around them. Between these galaxies lies the intracluster medium, a ghostly atmosphere of plasma heated to millions of degrees, glowing with a fierce energy that our eyes cannot perceive. We are witnessing the universe as a singular living organism of light and shadow. It is like observing the mycelial network beneath a forest floor, where the visible mushrooms are but the fruit of a much larger, hidden system of connections. The Webb telescope is our most refined sense organ, a delicate needle tracing the grooves of a record that has been playing since the beginning of time. We see the universe as a delicately woven lace of a frost-covered window, where every line is a filament, and every intersection is a cluster of suns. We are finally seeing the silver circuitry of the deep, where the wires are dark matter, and the pulses are the birth of stars, realizing that the framework of reality is far more intricate than the light alone suggests. Drifting deeper into the architecture of the immense, we find that the universe does not distribute its treasures with a uniform hand. As we pull back our perspective, galaxies begin to lose their individual identities, merging into the vast, interconnected structures of superclusters. We reside within Laniakea, a name that evokes the concept of an immeasurable heaven. This supercluster is a massive gravitational watershed spanning over 500 million light years and containing the mass of 100 quadrillion suns. Within this domain, the motion of every galaxy is dictated by a shared destiny, a slow migration toward a region known as the Great Attractor. It is an alluvial fan of starlight where the currents of gravity dictate the path of every sun, drawing them toward a central, unseen heart. Beyond Laniakea, the scale of reality organizes itself into galactic walls and filaments. These are the primary conduits of the cosmos, the Great Wall and the Sloan Great Wall, stretching across billions of light years. These structures are the nodes and threads of the cosmic web, where gravity has pulled matter into long, thin veins of a celestial leaf. It is a structure that reflects the organic growth of the deep, where the filaments serve as the structural beams of the night. These are the narrow thoroughfares of the infinite, along which matter travels to reach the intersections where the densest concentrations of galaxies reside. Yet, the most startling realization comes not from where the matter is, but from where it is not. Between these luminous filaments lie the cosmic voids, the great deserts of the universe. These are vast, spherical expanses of near-total emptiness, some stretching hundreds of millions of light-years across. The Boötes void is so profoundly vacant that it is like a vast oceanic trench of the vacuum, where the pressure of nothingness shapes the light around it. These voids are not merely passive gaps. They act as the negative space of a master's sculpture, defining the form of the filaments by their very absence. We see the universe now as the porous limestone of the deep, where the solid substance is but a thin shell surrounding the magnificent, empty interior of the great basins of the unmanifest. Letting this knowledge settle, we recognize that the void is as essential to the structure of reality as the stars themselves, providing the silence that allows the song of matter to be heard. Drifting deeper into the architecture of the visible, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a shoreline that is not defined by land, but by the very speed of time's arrival. This is the concept of the particle horizon, the absolute boundary of our observable reality. It is the furthest distance from which a particle of light, traveling since the very first moment of the cosmic dawn, has finally reached our eyes. When we look out into the night, we are not seeing the universe as it is in its entirety, but only the portion that has had enough time to communicate its existence to us. Because the fabric of space has been stretching for nearly 14 billion years, this horizon has expanded far beyond the simple calculation of light travel time, reaching out into a sphere approximately 4 to 6 billion light years in every direction. It represents the limit of our causal connection to the cosmos, the boundary beyond which no signal, no flash of heat, and no gravity wave has yet been able to bridge the gap. Letting this knowledge settle, we recognize that the observable universe is a finite volume of space-time carved out of a much larger, perhaps infinite, whole. Within this grand sphere of observation, there exists a more subtle and dynamic threshold known as the Hubble sphere. At this specific distance, the expansion of the universe is occurring at exactly the speed of light. It is a mathematical horizon that marks a profound transition in the behavior of the heavens. Galaxies located inside this sphere are moving away from us at speeds slower than light, while those beyond it are receding at superluminal velocities. This does not contradict the laws of relativity, for it is not the objects themselves that are racing through space, but space itself that is swelling, increasing the distance between points with a relentless, compounding energy. It is the physics of the stage, rather than the actors, that dictates this recession. We are living in a pocket of relative stillness, while the distant reaches of the cosmos are being carried away by a current that defies the speed of the swiftest photon. To visualize this, imagine a wanderer carrying a lantern across a dark moor where a thick mist clings to the ground. The particle horizon is like the furthest reach of that lantern's glow, the point where the first light of the campfire has finally illuminated a single blade of grass. Beyond that point, the moor remains in absolute shadow, not because it does not exist, but because its light is still on its journey toward us. The Hubble sphere, however, is like a circular waterfall surrounding the wanderer. Anything that passes over the edge of that falls is carried away by a current so swift that no signal sent back can ever climb the crest. We are the inhabitants of a luminous clearing in a forest that is growing faster than we can walk through it. A sanctuary of perception where the laws of the local world provide a sense of stability, even as the horizon of the unobserved retreats into the silent, unreachable deep. Letting this knowledge settle into the stillness, we confront the reality that our reach into the cosmos is not infinite, but governed by a boundary that is slowly closing. While the observable universe appears to grow as light from distant realms finally reaches our eyes, there is a more somber limit known as the cosmic event horizon. This is the invisible perimeter of our future influence, a threshold currently standing about 16 billion light years away. It represents the ultimate limit of causality. Any event occurring beyond this line today will never, through all the eons of time, be witnessed by our descendants. Even if we were to launch a vessel at the very speed of light, it would be like a traveler crossing a bridge of sand being reclaimed by a rising tide, where the destination moves away faster than the feet can carry the body. The expansion of space acts as a relentless current, carrying the distant galaxies away into a realm where their light can no longer bridge the widening gap. We are witnessing the slow dismantling of the cosmic neighborhood, where the connections between galactic clusters are being severed one by one. This future visibility limit suggests a time, trillions of years from now, when the sky will undergo a profound transformation. The thousands of galaxies that currently grace our telescopes will begin to appear as if they are frozen in time, their images reddening and fading as they approach the horizon. Like a fading signature on a letter being pulled through a keyhole, their light will be stretched into wavelengths longer than the universe itself, eventually becoming undetectable. To any observer in that distant era, the cosmos will appear as a solitary campfire on a darkening plain, containing only our own local cluster of stars. The grand narrative of the Big Bang and the evidence of other worlds will be erased from the sky, as if the tapestry were being unraveled from the edges inward. The universe becomes a series of disconnected pockets, each unaware of the others, like the winding down of a clock whose gears are turning into mist. This process is the slow dimming of a theater's house lights, a transition from a crowded metropolis of light to a single, solitary lantern burning in a desert of absolute shadow. The information that defines the vastness of space is like slowly evaporating ink on a parchment of night, leaving behind a blank page where once there was a map of the infinite. We live in a privileged moment of cosmic history, a brief window where the light of the distant past still reaches us before the cooling breath of a giant pushes the candles on the table further and further away, until the darkness is all that remains.